Alright, welcome to this week's episode of the Academy. Today we're going to continue in our chapter 10. This will be part 5. We're going to cover sentences 21 to 24 of Sun Tzu's Art of War. He changes his thought process here a bit. Instead of going through something new like he did before with the terrain and what have you, and the faults of a general, calamities, here he's almost reminding us of what he's talked about in the past and how we need to go back and think about those things. So we're just going to read the 4 sentences, 21 through 24, and we'll see what we can come up with from those. Right. So sentence 21. The natural formation of the country is the soldier's best ally, but a power of estimating the adversary, of controlling the forces of victory, and of shrewdly calculating difficulties, dangers, and distances constitutes the test of a great general. He who knows these things and in fighting puts his knowledge into practice will win his battles. He who knows them not, nor practices them, will surely be defeated. If fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight, even though the ruler may forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight, even if at the ruler's bidding. The general who advances without coveting fame or retreats without fearing disgrace, whose only thought is to protect his country and do good service for his sovereign, is the jewel of the kingdom. Okay, 4 simple sentences, 3 concepts that are actually disparate, so we're going to cover the 3 different things together, or separately. Now, the sentences 21 and 22 actually are talking about what he's just dealt with. He's just talking about terrain and the advantages and if impacts of the terrain on your battles and your plans, your tactics, whatever. And he has mentioned before and stresses again here that natural terrain is your strongest ally. But as he's mentioned before, it's not going to assure you a victory. He goes on to reiterate and remind you that, as he said back in chapter 4 in sentences 17 and 18, practicing the 5 methods of military method, that is where you're going to shine. And so these two sentences help you refocus. Now, the terrain can offer you a lot of advantages by whether it's slowing the enemy down or putting an obstacle, keeping them hemmed in, pressed in so you can concentrate fire longer, keep you away from danger. There's a lot there. Anybody can really use terrain to their advantage pretty easily. But to be a good general, a great general in his words, you actually have to master the other 5 methods. And just a reminder, the methods are measurement, estimation of quantity, calculation, balancing of chances, and victory. I think victory is just in there kind of, it's a punctuation mark really. But measurement is your ability to gauge the distances. How long will it take you to get from point A to point B on the tabletop? How far is it? What's the range between you and the opponent for the different weapons you've got? How much distance is there between you and the opponent from a perspective of moving? Will you be moving, if you have to follow a road or a chasm, how long is it going to take you to get there? There's height, elevations, all these things you have to measure, right? Then you have to estimate the quantities that he calls. Now, back in the day, he's focusing probably on numbers because you can there's a lot to say about numbers of men. And back then you did try to intersperse your best men in with your normal men because you try to increase their morale and fighting capability. But we got to focus in terms, measuring not the quantity of models, but the quantity, if you will, of combat capacity. You need to be able to estimate that so that you kind of know what you can do to your opponent. You also need to be able to know what your opponent can do to you. Now, once you understand that and you understand the distances involved and the times involved because of the distances, now you start calculating what could happen, what will possibly happen, and then you start balancing the chances, the risk assessment part, the 4th method. When you're able to do all of that and do it well, you're much more likely to win than if you just rely on the terrain to give you an advantage. So that's what sentences 21 and 22 are trying to remind us. So I'll put a link back in the bottom of the description here if you want to go back and check out the video where I cover sentences 17 and 18 in chapter 4. Okay? but feel free, if at all possible, to spend some time, hopefully with your own copy, to kind of go over that and see how it would affect you. Now, sentence 23, it's, if the fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight. If not, then don't, Obviously, this doesn't really apply directly, because you're at the gaming, you're at your buddy's house, you're at the game shop, you're there to play, you're there to fight. So it's not a case of you don't want to not fight, you got a disadvantageous situation, you don't just give up, say no. But I will say this much, don't be afraid to say no. If the opponent you're going to go up against is bringing an army that you really don't have an answer to, which is entirely possible. If I were to fight one of the player's armies he does a Farsight Enclave, if I were to fight him, and the only thing I brought that day was my Imperial Guard, I'd just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm not going to be able to play because I don't have, for the point values that he's going to bring, I don't have the type of firepower and the combat capabilities that I would need to destroy him or injure him to give me a fighting chance to win any of those scenarios. Maybe even a Maelstrom, again, Imperial Guard aren't very good at mobility and getting Maelstrom objectives, so there's really not, I'd probably say no to that. And here, I'm a Tau player. I love playing Tau, but it's a mismatch, and I don't really want to necessarily lose this. So I should feel free to say no. Now, having said that, I have put a video up before about the Kobayashi Maru scenario, the no-win situation. Sometimes there's a value playing it, but remember, you got to make sure you're in the mindset to play something like that. It's okay to play it if you know you're going to lose. You're not upset about that. You're not going to be frustrated when the dice go bad on you. Because, I've seen it before. You've got a fighting chance with your army. It's going to be a near-run thing, but the dice just do not cooperate, and you can't roll an armor save to save your life. You can't roll to hit or wound to save your life. And it all goes south, and your opponent's dice are hot. It's just things like that happen. You don't want to end up being frustrated. So be mentally ready to play scenarios, but don't be afraid to say no if there's no chance of victory. Just don't be a sore loser about it, kind of thing. Just explain the situation. You don't have anything to really counter. I don't feel like it'd be a fun matchup. Be honest. Social contract here. You don't have to play the guy, okay? But in the same veins, don't create lists that are so overpowered that most people wouldn't want to play them, or could only play them if they have an equally OP army. It's not necessarily a good approach. Just some thoughts. All right. Finally, in sentence 24, this is a concept here that he's talking about the general's personality, where he's not doing his job to get fame or notoriety. He's not worried about losing face or being humiliated. He's just there to protect his sovereign and do the best for his country. Well, how does that apply to tabletop? I mean, really. Bear with me on this one. What I'm going to suggest for this is the concept here is about the personality of the general who will do what's best for his country, right? And disregard any personal implications. So let's apply it to you. Remember last video we talked about the 6 calamities, which are the things the player does wrong. So here, let's look at the player's personality. The player should be careful of why is he playing. Maybe get a little too deep here, but bear with me. Because it does actually affect your performance on the tabletop. If you're playing for your reputation, if you're playing to impress people, if you're playing and worried that something you might do is going to make you look bad, you might need to take a pause. Because the only reason I'm saying this is when you've got these non-tactical considerations in the back of your head weighing in on your decisions, you're more likely to make poorer decisions. And so you may press an attack too hard, too long, when you really should give up on it and try for a secondary attack, turning an indirect attack into the direct attack, right? You miss that completely because you're so focused on maintaining some image you have. You want to be thought of in a certain way, be careful. Now, a lot of us don't have to worry about that. I personally do. I like people liking me. I mean, that's just. I mean, I don't know who isn't like that, but sometimes it's to a fault. Sometimes, and I need to be sure that when I'm playing, that I am just. I want to be in the zone, but not in the sense of, like a tournament player in the zone. I'm talking about ignoring what other people are going to think. Just play the game, play the models I want to play, the way I want to play them, play the storyline, play the things the way I want to, so that I'm not thinking about what others would think of me. What would they think if I lose? What would they think if I lose really bad? What if I get tabled? Oh my goodness. Don't worry about it. I try not to think about those things. That way, those fears, those concerns aren't present in my mind, distracting me from my calculations, from my risk assessments, allowing me, hopefully, to make better decisions. And I lose. I mean, I'm like everybody, right? We win some, we lose some. Hopefully, we start winning more than we lose. For each army, it's different. For each matchup, is different, So, what I want you to think about is, on the tabletop, you can maybe see this play out. Maybe this is what's going on. When you're attacking more forcefully and continually, you're not actually playing the tactics, you're just forcing, almost using brute force. So I like to think of it in terms of this. A player who's willing to stay or hold off on an attack until its maximum effectiveness can be achieved, or who's willing to actually withdraw when things don't turn out so well, and then regroup and then apply a different approach. If you're able to do that, I think you're doing fine. You don't have to worry about this thing. But if you find yourself having difficulty doing those things, then maybe there's the stuff in the back of your mind that's potentially misleading you. So, I think it is actually, I think Wellington who said, the hardest thing for a soldier to do is retreat. For some reason, we often think in our minds that retreat is a bad thing. Retreat is not the same as a rout. Retreat is pulling back, giving up ground so that you are able to continue the fight. That's actually one of the things I liked about the fallback rule in the 7th edition, the way it was explained, or even 5th edition of 40Ks. You're not running away. You can still shoot back. You still shoot in your turn. You're just not shooting as effectively because you're falling back, facing the opponent, just moving away. That's a retreat. Running off the table, that's a rout. Okay, retreat here is nothing wrong with it. Don't be afraid to retreat. So, those are my thoughts for today. Hopefully that helped you see what Sun Tzu was trying to get at here. And if you found it useful, great comment below. Let me know. Honestly, I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this series. Share, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next edition of the Academy. Bye-bye.